I'm Paul Banis with GreatDad.com, and I have a really interesting guest here. I can't wait to get into this conversation because I think it's going to be really very mind expanding for all of us dads out here, just the kind of situations we're going to be talking about. But I'm talking to Jared Rosenthal today, who is a dad as well, got 2 kids, about the same age as mine, getting ready in college, getting ready for college, all that good stuff in COVID times, crazy world. We won't get into that, but he is the CEO founder of a company called Health Street, which is a company that does all types of lab testing, right, Jared?
Right.
I mean,
Correct.
one we're going to talk about today is DNA testing for paternity,
Right.
which you have some experience in that's really germane to our whole bailiwick in terms of fathering. But why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and the types of other things that Health Street does before we get into it?
Sure. Well, Health Street, we started actually as a mobile drug testing company and DNA testing. And, quick funny story is we started out, we put the urine cup on the side of the RV to advertise the drug testing services. And people didn't really like it. They called it the P-mobile and everything. And then I had the idea, well, let's put the DNA stuff on the side. So I put the slogan, "Who's your daddy?" on the side of the truck. And,
Wow.
and out of nowhere, it just blew up, and people started calling and got in the newspaper, and it was exciting. Some people were offended by the term, but for the most part, what I found was that it hit upon a nerve, and it's like something that's kind of just below the surface, especially for us fathers, it's like, maybe there's that little question. Hopefully there's not, but
yeah, I hate to say it, but it's a reality because you don't know as a dad.
Right.
You don't have 100% certainty unless you would take a test.
Right. And for millennia, there was no way to ever know, so.
And a lot of horrible things done with under suspicion too over millennia.
Oh yeah. I mean, this paternity testing gets really to the core of so much about fatherhood and about identity in many ways, identity as a father, or also for yourself as a human being, based on if you're trying to figure out who your parents are.
Yeah. Well, certainly, I know that with these ancestry tests now, people are doing some of the same DNA testing and finding out things not only about their prior history and everything, and upending their whole family, background story, but they're also finding things like, Uncle Charlie was really my dad or whatever, and that is.
Yeah, and we stick with the relationship side of it. Meaning we don't get into the ethnicity determination.
Right.
Although sometimes that comes up too, because, like I had a young woman who took a test and found out, much to her surprise, that the dad that raised her was not really her dad. And, which meant she was not the ethnicity she had always been raised as, and what do you do if you're 23 and you find out that, guess what? You're not really Italian, or whatever, substitute whatever. And you're actually.
Some people are really married. That's that huge part of their identity is that they are 100% Italian or whatever. And now they're.
It is. Else, and that's what this business has really made me think a lot about, that kind of stuff, like how much we take that as part of who we are, even though, and you start to say, well, what if I wasn't? Anybody could kind of fantasize. What if I found out I was the, not just different, but maybe the opposite, or maybe part of a group that I had a prejudice against, you know what I mean? And it really makes you think. And these kind of things, like I said, are just below the surface. But then when it comes time to an actual test, then, you get those results, and it's sometimes life shattering or life altering.
So what percentage of the time is it considered a good result or versus a surprising result, I guess? Yeah, that's the YouTube. Surprising versus necessarily bad.
Yeah. The surprising ones are usually the right. It's not really good or bad. It's expected versus unexpected. And the people that have a doubt, they're a little bit more prepared, maybe. Sometimes people have no doubt, and sometimes they take a test because they've been ordered to, but they didn't really take it because they were, questioning it for years. And when they could kind of find out, and then it's like, think of all the things that happen. You're potentially exposing a lie that maybe was told to you 10 years ago. You're it gets to your core relationship, perhaps with your spouse, but in some cases it gets to your core relationship with your child. It changes your child's relationship with their siblings. There's so many things that happen when you get one of these tests. And again, taking a step back, think like, wow, all of that is so part of how we think of ourselves. Maybe we should take that into account when we think of how we think of ourselves as individuals and as parents.
Yeah. So you've been exposed to all kinds of social issues and stories that you never thought you could even imagine, I'm sure, when you got into this business.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it's not like Maury, right? It's not just, oh, I'm dancing if I'm not the father, or it's not that kind of thing. It's because that's sort of like a cartoon version of what really happened. Most of the dads, if they're raising a child, I would say 99.
In general, you're not talking about guys who are like 20 who've like, ooh, boy, you dodged the bullet there. He's not my kid. You're talking more.
Yeah, in my experience, that kind of thing just doesn't happen. Even the young ones, once they have bonded with a child, they are devastated if they get the result that they're not the father. I mean, that's just the reality. I had a guy with an infant, and the mom was in the hospital with postpartum depression, and
so he was having to step up.
He was raising this infant. And I think he was older. The insurance company said, oh, you want a life insurance policy, you're over 50 or something like that. Get the paternity test. And he had no idea that his wife was slept with somebody else. And he's like, hey, don't tell anybody. I don't want it. Will this get reported? I'm going to raise this kid. I'm not going to tell her. Wow. Now he was raising a kid for 2 weeks.
Wow. And he already bonded that much. Wow.
Right. I mean, that's the kind of emotions that that fatherhood brings out, really.
Yeah.
But so the ones were like, oh, I'm dancing because I don't have to pay the child support. That's for talk shows. That's not the reality of it. Yeah. Which is, I think, a good thing.
So you quoted me a statistic that, or a rule of thumb, 1 out of 3 are surprising results based on what you see. I mean, it's obviously it's not 1 out of 3 are you're not the dad, but 1 out of 3 people who get tests basically there's a surprise.
And we don't have hard data on that because it's not part of the system, but in my experience, that's been the case. And I've seen studies that have reported similar numbers. It's, for whatever reason, that kind of holds true. But that's not to say 1 out of 3 dads are not the father of their kid that raised.
Hope not.
A much smaller number, than that, but it is some number. Even if you think about your history of your family going back generations, if there's a certain percentage of dads who aren't really the father of their kids, then that means there's a certain percentage of your family history that's probably not what you think it is for everybody.
Yeah.
It's kind of fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure it's a lot more prevalent than we know or imagined for money. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Even when there were suspicions. So, you said you had one crucial piece of advice when it comes to this whole situation. If you're confronted with doubt or a forced test or whatever, and you get a surprising result, one crucial piece of advice, what would that be?
Well, I would say, I would never encourage somebody to take a test or not take a test. If you're a dad and you want to be the father, you are the father, you're the known father, you're the legal father, and you want to remain that father. And if you have a doubt, it doesn't mean you need to take a test. But one thing I would say is when you have those doubts, the sooner you resolve them, the better. We get calls from people who have waited for decades. And I literally mean decades. The oldest people I tested was a man who was 67 and his father who was 91. And they took the DNA test after all those years. The sooner you get to the truth, the less impactful an unexpected result would be.
Yeah. That's really good advice. I mean, it's like a lot of things in life. The longer you put it off. I mean, I work as a coach for dads when I'm not doing podcasts and YouTube videos. But there are a lot of issues in fatherhood that are like that putting things off, especially something as major as this. Telling a child that he's adopted, for example, is another one. You don't wait until they're 20 years old, because the way it rocks their world at that age is a lot different than the horrible, experience of having to tell them when they're 6 or 7 or whatever that crucial age is. But yeah,
I couldn't agree more with that. And, obviously we also get into or in the middle of situations involving sperm donor children, some who have been told by their parents, some of who have not, obviously adoption, surrogacy, there's testing involved. You hire a surrogate to have kids, and then when the child is born, immediately they need a maternity and a paternity test. They need both to confirm before they even take the child in some cases. So all of those things have sometimes quite dramatic outcomes. And but the advice about that is one other thing that I have learned for sure, without a doubt, that I wouldn't hesitate giving advice to anybody, and I've given it to my friends who have adopted, is the sooner you tell them, the better.
Yeah.
Don't let there be questions about it. It's not about you. It's about identity.
Yeah.
They could love you to death, and forever, and I hope they will. But don't rock their world and their identity. 20 years later, that's not going to be good.
Yeah. Well, really, this whole identity piece that you talk about, is paternity fatherhood? Is fatherhood paternity? Is just a really basic question. How much of it is pure biology, and how much of it is shared experience, shared love, shared, all the things that go into being a really great father today are not necessarily just the sperm at that moment that meets the egg. And I can't even imagine the question I'd go through, but I hope I would rise to the challenge and be able to separate those two and not see the difference if I had to go through it. But it's fascinating. And
right. And yes, I don't mean to step in.
No, go ahead.
There's so many emotions too. But this question of, is it like what's more powerful, biology or, nature or nurture, right?
Yeah.
So you're raising a child, you're in love. So any dad could look at their child that has no doubt at all, but pose them this sort of fantasy question, like, well, what would I do? And then that gets to that question of, well, what defines this relationship? Is it all of those things you just explained? I've taken this kid to baseball practice.
Yeah.
We were born. I've taught him that, in the love that you have. How could that disappear because you get a slip from the lab, right? But then there's other things, like maybe there's some taboos around it, and shame or anger or all these things that you would have to go through. But it's a tough exercise to go through as a dad, but I think it's a worthwhile one to think that through, to help define, well, what really is this fatherhood thing all about?
I agree with you. I mean, as painful as it would be to do that mind exercise, maybe it would crystallize some things in your mind, whether the biology thing is like, you're a dad because you gave your sperm, then you don't really, it excuses you for all the reasons why you have to show up every day as the person who, post pregnancy is there every day. Cause that's not the same thing as, impregnating a woman is not the same thing as being a father. That's definitely true.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
No doubt. And there's it's so deep, and yet on the flip side, there's so much humor around this topic, and jokes, so we don't really tend to think through or go through those mental exercises, because you want to, it's so much easier to joke around about
discomfort. I mean, I think there's a lot of discomfort, right?
There's a lot of discomfort, and there's judgment. I mean, one thing we really try to do is absolutely never judge clients, because they're coming in with crazy stories that, in a normal course of life, you'd be joking around about these things. But when it's real, we don't judge, obviously. It's just whatever situation you're in. All right, let's help you understand what it is as best we can.
Yeah. Wow. This has really been a really interesting conversation. Let us know how if you go to healthstreet.com, I see that you've got a series of different tests you can buy, including background checks and things, but the DNA ones come in several flavors. You can actually even do post-mortem DNA tests, which I was surprised at. But the two ones that maybe clarify are the legal one and just the home one, and why there are two different types, and how that
Sure. Yeah. So if you are a dad of a young child, you're always going to want to do the legal test. The only difference between the tests is whether or not you could use them for anything. It's the same test, but the legal one means that somebody is going to take your photo ID and your thumbprint and put it on the form along with the results, so that if you needed it for child support issues or whatever other child custody issues you might have, then you could use that report. The home report is just for your knowledge, and it won't hold up for anything, So, the post-mortem one is one where, unfortunately, sometimes dads pass away, and there's questions, or it needs to be established for survivor benefits, or maybe they weren't married to the mother. So there's all kinds of reasons why you'd want it. It also happens with older people that pass away with estates, and decades old secrets sometimes come out, and or long lost siblings show up, or kids that brothers and sisters never knew they had another brother or sister, but the father passes away at 80, and somebody shows up and says, "Hey, my mom told me this story, and she gave me this envelope, and she said, open it up," and and then boom, we got to do
the movies.
Yeah, and it really does happen. It's wild. The craziest one I ever had to do was we had to go to a funeral home and cut a chunk of a guy's leg out to get the DNA from the cadaver.
Oh my God.
To do the test.
Yeah. Is there, I mean, there's morbid curiosity, but is there a time limit on how long somebody could be dead where you could still do the DNA test? I know they get better at this all the time.
Yeah, well, I think they got DNA from
DNA, for God's sake.
Right, King Tut. They could tell you if you came from King Tut. Yeah, but before they embalm the person, you can still get it in a more traditional way. The longer it takes, the harder it is to get. So you might not get enough DNA to, if you wait. So it's harder and more costly, especially if you have to bring a shovel.
Yeah. All right. This has been really good. Anything else you want to say about Health Street and what other things you guys do there?
Yeah. Oh, just to say the website is actually health-street.net.
Okay.
And and it's all kinds, and one thing which is becoming more, say popular is not just the paternity test, but a lot of sibling tests that, didn't used to be as widely sought after, but people are finding each other on Facebook and whatnot, and so we do a lot of that as well.
A lot of heartwarming stories.
Yeah, some of them are really amazing. So the tough ones are sometimes devastating if we go through it with the client, but the heartwarming ones are really bringing together sisters after 20 years. Like, wow, that's just amazing.
Yeah, in general, maybe I don't hear the negative ones, but so many of the stories are these stories about families who are like open arms, inviting somebody else in, and are so excited. So that's great.
Yeah.
All right, Jared, thank you for spending the time with me this morning, your afternoon in Brooklyn. And it's, again, Jared Rosenthal, CEO, founder of health-street.net, right?
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Okay. Have a good day. Thanks.
Bye-bye.